The research station floated silently in the darkness of space, orbiting a field of asteroids that glittered like frozen tears. Inside, the lights hummed with steady power, and the air recyclers breathed life through metal corridors. This was Harmony's Edge, a place where humans and learned to live together among the stars. Stared at her computer screen until her eyes burned. The blue light reflected off her tired face. She had been sitting in the same chair for 14 hours now, watching data scroll past in endless streams of numbers and genetic codes. Her back hurt. Her neck was stiff, but she could not stop working. The samples in front of her were too important. Each vial contained cells from the people who lived on the station, was comparing them to human cells, looking for patterns in how they healed and grew. The research deadline was only 2 days away, and she was behind schedule. She reached for her water bottle and took a small sip. Her stomach made a quiet sound, asking for food, ignored it. She had ignored it this morning when she skipped breakfast. She had ignored it 3 hours ago when lunchtime came and went. Food could wait. Science could not. In another part of the station, a small figure moved through the corridors with curious steps. Pip was young by standards, barely 6 years old in the way humans counted time. He was covered in smooth scales that shimmered between blue and green when the light touched them. His eyes were large and round, filled with the wonder that only children possess. Pip was supposed to be learning. Children did not sit in classrooms like human children did. Instead, they wandered and observed. They learned by watching, by touching, by experiencing the world around them. Today, Pip had decided to explore the science wing of the station. He found the observation windows interesting. They let him peek into the laboratories without disturbing the workers inside. Most of the labs were empty at this hour. The scientists had gone to eat lunch or take breaks, but one lab still had someone inside. Pip pressed his small hands against the cool glass and looked in. A human female sat at a workstation, her fingers moving quickly across a keyboard. Pip had seen her before. Her name was. She was always kind when she passed him in the corridors, always stopping to say hello in her strange, soft voice. But something seemed wrong today. Pip tilted his head, studying her carefully. Skin looked pale, even paler than the usual light color of humans. She moved slowly as if her body was heavy. As Pip watched, reached for something on her desk and her hand trembled. Pip's large eyes grew wider. Was she sick? Humans were so fragile compared to, everyone knew this. Their soft skin had no protective scales. They could not go days without water like could. They needed special care. Stood up from her chair, and that was when it happened. Her body swayed to the side like a tree in the wind. She grabbed the edge of her desk with both hands, holding on tight. For a moment, she seemed to steady herself. Then her grip weakened, and she slumped back into her chair, her head falling forward. Pip's heart beat fast in his small chest. The human was dying. She needed help. He had learned about this in his education modules. Different species had different needs. When someone was in danger, you had to act quickly. The cub spun around and ran down the corridor as fast as his small legs could carry him. His clawed feet clicked and clattered on the metal floor, making an urgent rhythm. He knew exactly where he needed to go. The commissary. That was where the food was kept. Did not eat often. An adult could go 3 or 4 days between meals without any problem. But Pip had paid attention during the lessons about humans. They were different. They needed food more often, much more often. If had not eaten, that could explain why she looked so weak. The commissary was busy when Pip burst through the doors. Several crew members looked up in surprise as the small cub rushed inside, chirping urgently. His species did not speak in full sentences at his age. Instead, they communicated through sounds and gestures, through emotion carried in tone and movement. Behind the counter stood a human woman with short dark hair and kind eyes. She managed the commissary and knew every crew member by name. She smiled when she saw Pip approach. "Hello, little one," said warmly. Are you hungry? Would you like to try some human food? Pip shook his head frantically, his whole body moving with the gesture. He pointed at the storage units where food was kept. He made urgent chirping sounds, trying to make understand. Human, help, food, now. Smile faded, replaced by concern. Is someone hurt? Do you need food for someone? Pip nodded so hard his head bobbed up and down like a ball. Sick, no eat. Understanding began to dawn on his face. She moved quickly to the storage area and started gathering items. A sandwich in sealed packaging, some fresh fruit from the hydroponics bay, a thermal container of soup. She placed them on the counter, thinking this would be enough for someone who had missed a meal. But Pip looked at the small pile of food and became more agitated. He chirped louder, his distress clear in every sound. No, 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 not enough. The human needed more. In culture, when someone was sick or weak, you brought them abundance. You showed how much you cared by the amount you gave. Bringing only a little bit would be an insult. It would suggest you did not truly care about their recovery. The small cub tried to reach the storage units himself, standing on his back legs to grab at containers on the lower shelves. Moved to stop him gently, but Pip's distress calls grew louder. The sound echoed through the commissary, urgent and afraid. The noise brought running from where he had been eating his own lunch at a corner table. He was a human engineer with strong hands and a quick mind. He was also his friend and colleague. What is happening here? Asked, looking between and the frantic cub. It's explained quickly. I think she's in trouble. Pip says she's sick and hasn't eaten. His expression changed immediately. He knew how she worked when a deadline approached. She would forget to eat, forget to rest, forget everything except her research. He had warned her about it before, but she never listened. How long? Asked Pip gently, kneeling down to the cub's eye level. Pip held up both hands, then opened and closed them several times, trying to show time passing. Long time, very long, fall down. That was enough for. He stood and started helping Pip gather food. Not just a meal, but supplies. Protein bars and nutrient paste. Freeze-dried packets and thermal soups. Fresh synthesized fruit and vegetables. Even the precious chocolate that humans treasured so much. Brought out in cart, the kind they used to transport heavy equipment. Together, the three of them loaded it with food. The pile grew higher and higher. Other crew members in the commissary stopped eating to watch the strange sight. A human and a cub working together to build a mountain of supplies. Is that enough? Asked Pip. The cub looked at the cart, his head tilting left and then right as he considered. Then he grabbed one more container of soup, one that was almost as big as his own small body. He clutched it to his chest with both arms. Now enough, Pip said firmly. Now save. Smiled despite the worry in his heart. The cub's compassion touched something deep inside him. This was why the station existed, he thought. This was why humans and were learning to live together. Because kindness could cross the space between stars. Because caring was universal, even if the way it was shown was different. Come on then, said, taking control of the cart. Let's go save our friend. They left the commissary together, the man and the cub, pushing a cart full of enough food to feed 20 people. Behind them, the other crew members whispered to each other, wondering what emergency could require so much. But Pip did not stop to explain. They had a mission, and time was precious. The corridors of Harmony's Edge seemed longer than usual as they hurried toward the science wing. Pip ran ahead sometimes, then circled back to make sure was following. The cub's anxiety was clear in every movement, in every worried chirp. Finally, they reached the laboratory where worked. The doors were sealed but had access codes. He pressed his hand to the panel and the doors hissed open. Inside sat at her desk, her head in her hands. She had recovered enough to sit up, but she still looked weak and pale. The sound of the doors opening made her look up, confusion clear on her tired face. What she saw made her blink in disbelief. Standing in her laboratory doorway was Pip, tiny and determined. with behind him pushing a cart stacked impossibly high with every kind of food imaginable. I started to speak, but her voice came out rough and quiet. "What is all this?" Pip did not wait for permission. He rushed forward, his small arms struggling with the container of soup he still carried. He placed it on his desk with a soft thump, then immediately started grabbing more items from the cart, arranging them around her workspace. And in that moment, as watched the small cub work with such fierce determination to help her, she felt tears sting her eyes, not from pain or exhaustion, but from something else entirely. Something warm and overwhelming that had no name but felt like coming home. Pip's small hands moved quickly, placing food containers on every flat surface in the laboratory. A protein bar landed on top of a data pad. Fruit packages appeared next to delicate sample analyzers. The thermal soup container sat proudly in the center of his desk, steaming gently through its sealed lid. The cub worked with serious focus, his scales shimmering as he moved through the light. Each placement was deliberate, as if the position of every food item mattered greatly. To Pip, it did matter. This was not just about giving food. This was about showing care in the proper way. Stood near the door, watching with a mixture of amusement and concern. He caught his eye and shrugged slightly, as if to say, "I tried to reason with him, but have you ever tried to stop a determined child?" Opened her mouth to speak, but Pip made a distressed chirping sound that stopped her words. The cub's large eyes were wet, reflecting the laboratory lights. His small chest moved up and down with quick, anxious breaths. To him, every second counted. The human had fallen. She might still be dying. "No eat," Pip said, his voice breaking on the words. His limited human vocabulary made the statement simple, but the emotion behind it was vast and deep. Fall, must eat much, must be strong. The tears that had been stinging's eyes finally fell, rolling down her cheeks in warm tracks. She reached out with one hand, placing it gently on Pip's smooth, scaled head. The cub went still under her touch, waiting. "Oh, Pip," said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you so much, little one." To show him she understood, to show him his rescue had worked, picked up one of the protein bars. Her hands shook slightly as she tore open the package. The bar was dense and brown, packed with nutrients and calories. She took a bite, chewing slowly and deliberately so Pip could see. The change in the cub was immediate and dramatic. His drooping ears perked up straight. His tail, which had been hanging limply, began to curl and uncurl with excitement. She was eating. The human was eating. His rescue had worked. He had saved her. A sound came from Pip's throat, a happy trill that cubs made when they felt joy and relief. He bounced slightly on his feet, unable to contain the emotion. Smiled, finally allowing himself to relax a little. "When did you last eat?" asked, pulling a chair over and starting to organize the mountain of food into more reasonable arrangements. He moved the items away from delicate equipment, creating a safer space. Swallowed her bite of protein bar and thought about it. Time had become strange during her long work session. Hours had blended together into one continuous stretch of data and analysis. "Yesterday morning, I think," she finally answered. "Maybe breakfast. I am not completely sure." The sound that came from Pip was unlike anything it heard before. It was high and sharp, filled with such distress that both humans winced. Yesterday. The human had not eaten since yesterday. In Pip's young mind, this was catastrophic. Adults could go days between meals without problem, but he had learned that humans were different. They needed food more often. Much more often. "Yesterday," Pip repeated, his voice almost a wail. He grabbed another food package and thrust it toward. Must eat now." Okay, said gently, taking the package from him. It was a sealed container of fresh fruit, strawberries grown in the station's hydroponics bay. She opened it and ate one slowly, making sure Pip could see every bite. "See, I am eating." Settled into the chair he had pulled over, unwrapping a sandwich for himself. If this was going to be a meal, he might as well join in. "You scared us," he said quietly. "You scared this little one very badly." More crew members began to appear at the laboratory door, drawn by the commotion and the unusual sight of a cart parked in the science wing. They whispered to each other, curious about what was happening. Word traveled fast on a space station. Someone radioed someone else. People came to see. Among those who arrived was Administrator, or Pip's parent. The adult was taller than any human, with scales that had deepened to a darker blue with age, or moved with the careful grace that came from living in different gravity environments for many years. "Pip," or said, the name carrying a note of stern concern. "What have you done? The commissary manager reports that you requisitioned significant supplies without proper authorization." The young cub turned to face his parent, and for a moment he seemed to shrink in on himself. But then his small spine straightened. His chin lifted with determination. "Was dying," Pip said firmly. "Had to help, had to bring food." Or looked past the cub to where sat at her desk, surrounded by enough food to last a week. The administrator's expression was hard to read, their features arranged in ways that humans still struggled to interpret. There was a long moment of silence. Then Or did something unexpected. The administrator's posture softened and they approached with careful steps. "Is this true? You were in medical distress." "Not exactly," said, feeling embarrassed now. "I just forgot to eat while I was working. I got dizzy and sat down. I was not really dying, just foolish." "You fell," Pip insisted, not willing to let his rescue be diminished. "I saw through window, you fell." Looked at the cub's earnest face and could not bring herself to argue with him. In his mind, he had saved a life. Who was she to take that away from him? "You are right, Pip, I fell. And you helped me. You are a hero." The word hero made Pip stand even taller. His chest puffed out with pride. Other cubs who had gathered with the crowd whispered to each other, looking at Pip with new respect. He had saved a human. He had acted quickly in an emergency. He was brave. Or studied the scene with thoughtful eyes. Then the administrator made a decision. "Very well. What is done is done. But this incident reveals something important. We have humans and living together, working together, but perhaps we do not understand each other's needs as well as we should." Nodded agreement. "That is true." Pip did what he thought was right. He saw someone in trouble and he helped. That is admirable. But he also brought enough food for 20 people because he did not know how much a human actually needs. "And I," added softly, "worked until I collapsed because I did not value my own needs enough. I thought dedication meant ignoring my body's signals. Maybe that is a human failing too." The administrator considered this. "Then perhaps we all have things to learn. Pip, you showed great compassion today. You acted with speed and determination. But you also took resources without understanding. We will turn this into a lesson for everyone." An idea formed in his mind. She looked at Pip, then at Or. "Could I teach the cubs about human needs, and maybe learn more about needs in return? We could create an educational program. Understanding human biology, understanding biology, things we all should know." Or's eyes brightened, which was the way of showing interest. "This is a good idea. Knowledge prevents mistakes. Understanding prevents accidents." "Can I help?" Pip asked eagerly, bouncing on his feet again. "Can I be teacher too?" Smiled, the first real smile she had managed in days. "Yes, little one. You can be my assistant. You can show the other cubs what you learned today." The gathered crowd began to disperse, people returning to their duties with a new story to tell. The commissary would be buzzing with talk about the brave cub who saved a human scientist. The tale would grow in the telling, as tales always did. But in the laboratory, a quieter scene unfolded. Continued to eat, choosing items from the abundant supply Pip had brought. The cub watched carefully, making sure she took proper bites and chewed thoroughly. Helped organize the food, packing most of it back onto the cart to return to the commissary. Not all, Pip protested when tried to take the chocolate. Needs special food, humans love. Paused, then smiled and left the chocolate on his desk. He is not wrong about that. As the immediate crisis faded, something else began to grow in its place. A bond between a human scientist and a cub, a connection that crossed the space between species, built on a simple foundation of caring. Finished a sandwich and drank an entire bottle of water. Color began to return to her face. Her hands stopped shaking. Strength flowed back into her body like electricity through a wire. She had not realized how weak she had become until the weakness started to fade. Pip settled on the floor near her chair, his mission complete but his vigil continuing. He would not leave until he was certain the human was truly recovered. This was his responsibility now. He had claimed it when he brought the kitchen to her. Or stayed a while longer observing. The administrator saw more than just a cub bringing food to a human, or saw the future of the station. This was what integration truly meant, not just humans and living in the same space, but caring about each other's. Taking action when someone needed help, even if the help was imperfect. I will speak to the council, or said before leaving. We will make your educational program official, and we will discuss new protocols for mixed species stations. Today, we learned valuable lessons. When they were finally alone, Just and Pip in the quiet laboratory reached down and stroked Pip's head again. The cub leaned into the touch, a soft purring sound rumbling in his throat. Thank you, Pip, she whispered. Not just for the food, thank you for caring enough to help. The cub looked up at her with those large, luminescent eyes. In them, saw something pure and simple. Love that knew no boundaries of species or culture. Compassion that required no shared language. Kindness that transcended all differences. And in that moment, sitting in her laboratory surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned research, understood something important. The most significant discovery was not in her genetic samples or her data files. It was right here, in the connection between beings who should have been alien to each other but had chosen to be family instead. 3 days after the incident, stood in one of the station's educational spaces, preparing for her first teaching session. The room was designed to accommodate both human and bodies comfortably. Chairs of different sizes lined the curved walls. The ceiling glowed with soft, adjustable light that could be changed to suit either species' vision needs. Pip arrived early, bouncing with excitement. He carried a small data pad that had given him, loaded with images and information about human biology. The cub had studied it constantly since receiving it, memorizing every detail with the intense focus that only children possess when something truly interests them. Ready, teacher? Pip asked, his voice eager. Smiled down at him. Ready, assistant teacher, are you ready? The cub nodded so enthusiastically that his whole body moved with emotion. He had practiced what he would say, or had helped him choose the right words, the ones that would make sense to other young. Other cubs began arriving, led by their guardians. There were 5 of them, ranging in age from what humans would call 4 to 8 years old. Their scales showed different colors and patterns, marking them as individuals. They chirped and clicked to each other, curious about this special lesson. A few human children came too, brought by parents who worked on the station. It was rare for human children to attend educational sessions, just as it was unusual for cubs to sit in human classrooms. But this lesson was different. This was about understanding each other. Arrived with recording equipment, setting up cameras to capture the session. Administrator or had requested this. If the program worked well here, it would be shared with other mixed stations throughout known space. Welcome everyone, began, speaking slowly and clearly. Today we are going to learn about how different we are and also how similar. We will start with something simple, food. She pulled up a holographic display that showed the inside of a human body. The cubs leaned forward, fascinated by the glowing organs and flowing blood vessels. Human anatomy was strange to them, so different from their own. Humans need to eat several times every day, explained. Our bodies burn through energy quickly. If we do not eat for too long, we become weak. We can become dizzy. We can fall down. Like fell, Pip added importantly, I saw it happen. The other cubs looked at Pip with new interest. They knew the story, of course. Everyone on the station knew about Pip's dramatic rescue, but hearing it from him directly made it more real. Yes, like I fell, confirmed. I made a mistake. I worked for 14 hours without eating. That is too long for a human. We should eat every 4 to 6 hours. One of the cubs raised a small clawed hand. But my parent says eat every 3 days. Why are humans different? Excellent question, said warmly. Let me show you. She changed the holographic display to show a body next to a human body, both transparent so you could see inside. See these organs here. In this is where you store energy very efficiently. You can keep energy for many days, but humans do not have organs like this. We store some energy, but not as much. We burn it faster. The cubs studied the images carefully. One of them reached out to touch the hologram, their small hand passing through the light. So humans are weaker? The cub asked. Not weaker, said carefully, just different. Humans can do things that find difficult. We can run for a very long time without stopping. We can climb well. We heal from many injuries, and we are very good at solving problems in creative ways. But yes, we need to eat more often. That is just how our bodies work. Pip stood up wanting to share what he had learned. And when humans do not eat, they show signs. Signs we can see, became pale. Pale means her skin lost color. It is a warning, and she moved slowly, and she shook. He demonstrated by making his small hand tremble. Very good, Pip praised. Those are all warning signs. If you see a human showing these signs, they might need food or water or rest. But how much food? Another cub asked. Pip brought very much food. My guardian said it was enough for many days. This question made and several adults in the room smile. It was the heart of the misunderstanding. That is the important lesson, said. Pip brought so much food because in culture, when you want to help someone who is sick, you bring abundance. You bring a lot to show you care deeply. Is that right? Or stepped forward, joining the teaching. Yes, that is correct. In our culture, the amount of resources you bring shows the depth of your concern. If you only bring a little, it suggests you do not care very much. So Pip brought a great amount to show he cared greatly. And that is beautiful, said, her voice sincere. Pip's heart was in the right place, but a human only needs a reasonable amount of food, one meal, maybe a snack, not enough for many days. She pulled up an image showing appropriate portion sizes. This much would have been perfect for helping me. Pip looked at the image, his ears drooping slightly. I brought too much. No, said quickly, kneeling down to his level. You brought exactly what your culture taught you to bring, but now you know what a human actually needs. That is what learning is about. We make mistakes and then we learn from them. The education session continued for another hour, showed them more about human physiology, how humans need to drink water throughout the day, how they need sleep every night, not every few days like, how their body temperature needs to stay in a narrow range, which is why the station kept different zones at different temperatures. In return, or taught the human children about needs, how direct sunlight could damage their sensitive scales, how they needed mineral supplements that came from their home world, how young cubs needed to touch and be touched frequently, as physical contact helped their emotional development. The children, both human and, listened with attention that surprised the adults. Young minds were flexible, ready to absorb new information without the prejudices and assumptions that older beings sometimes carried. Arrived near the end of the session pushing a cart, but this time it was not piled high with chaotic abundance. It was organized and planned. She had prepared a demonstration. I brought examples, announced. This is what a proper meal looks like for one human. She showed them a plate with a sandwich, some fruit, and a drink. And this is what might eat when they have their meal. She revealed a container filled with a thick, mineral-rich paste that found nutritious. The amounts were very different. The cubs examined both meals with interest. The contrast was clear. Understanding began to settle in their young minds like seeds in fertile soil. As the session ended, parents and guardians collected their children, but many lingered, talking to each other. Human parents speaking with guardians, questions being asked and answered, barriers of misunderstanding beginning to dissolve. Reviewed the recordings, nodding with satisfaction. This is good material, he said too, very clear, easy to understand. Other stations will benefit from this. But something else was happening that found even more interesting. During his review of the recordings, he noticed something unusual. He pulled aside, showing her his data pad. "Look at this," he said, pointing to technical readouts. "These are the station system logs from the day of the incident, when Pip was in the commissary gathering food." Studied the information, her scientist's mind quickly parsing the technical data. These are security protocols. They show that restricted storage was accessed. "Right," confirmed. "But Pip is a cub. He does not have clearance for restricted storage. The commissary manager certainly did not authorize it. So how did he get access to those supplies?" Frowned, thinking. Emergency override, but that requires an administrator's code. Or, said carefully, an emergency recognition by the station's AI system. They looked at each other, the implications sinking in. Harmony's Edge, like all modern stations, had an artificial intelligence system that managed countless daily operations. It monitored life support, controlled temperature, managed power flow, and handled 1,000 other tasks. But it was not supposed to make independent decisions about security access. "You think the AI recognized Pip's distress?" asked slowly. "Look at the audio logs," said, pulling up another file. The system recorded Pip's distress calls, and then 7 seconds later it granted emergency access to restricted commissary storage. No human authorized it. No administrator approved it. The system did it on its own. Felt a chill run down her spine, but it was not a chill of fear. It was excitement. Scientific excitement. The AI interpreted emotional distress across species barriers. It understood that Pip's calls meant an emergency, even though those calls were in a vocalization pattern, not human words. "Exactly," said, "and if it can do that, then it is learning," finished. "Really learning, not just following programmed responses. It is developing pattern recognition that crosses species." They stood in silence for a moment, considering what this meant. Station AIs were sophisticated, but they operated within defined parameters. They did not adapt to new situations that fell outside their programming, or at least, they were not supposed to. "We need to investigate this further," said, carefully, quietly. "If the AI is developing emergent capabilities, that is significant, but we do not want to alarm anyone." "Agreed, we will study it, document it, see if it happens again." He paused, "though hopefully there will not be another emergency for it to respond to." Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Pip was telling his parent about the teaching session. The cub was proud of his role as assistant teacher, but he was also thoughtful. "I understand now," Pip said. "Humans need different amounts then, and showing care is not just about how much you give. It is about giving the right thing." Or looked down at the small cub with affection and pride. "You have learned an important lesson, little one. Compassion must be paired with understanding. Both are necessary." "But I still care very much," Pip insisted, "even if I give smaller amounts now." "The amount does not change the caring," Or assured him. "The caring is in here." The administrator touched Pip's chest gently where a heart beat beneath smooth scales. "The amount is just details, details we can learn, but the heart that wants to help, That cannot be taught. You already have it. Pip thought about this as he prepared for sleep that night. He thought about and how scared he had been when he saw her fall. He thought about bringing the food, about pushing that heavy cart through the corridors, about wanting so desperately to save her. And he realized that even though he had brought too much food, even though he had not understood human needs perfectly, the important part had been right. He had seen someone in trouble and he had helped. That was what mattered. The details could be learned. The caring was already there. 2 weeks passed on Harmony's edge, and the station settled into new rhythms. The educational sessions became regular events. Twice a week, humans gathered to learn about each other. Children led many of these sessions, asking questions that adults sometimes hesitated to voice. The walls between species felt thinner with each passing day. Noticed changes in her own life. She no longer worked through meals. It was impossible to do so because Pip had appointed himself her personal meal guardian. Every day at the times when humans typically ate, the small cub would appear at her laboratory door. He would carry a carefully selected snack, nothing excessive, just appropriate portions. A piece of fruit, a protein bar, sometimes just a reminder that it was time to visit the commissary. At first had protested gently. She did not need a child watching over her, but Pip's determination was absolute and his care was genuine. So she accepted his guardianship and found that it brought structure to her days. She was healthier now, more focused. The research she had pushed so hard to complete actually progressed faster when she gave her body the fuel it needed. In return, spent time with Pip outside of teaching sessions. She showed him the wonders of her research, explaining genetics in simple terms. The cub had a quick mind and asked thoughtful questions. Sometimes Or would join them, and the three would discuss science and culture late into the station's night cycle. But something else occupied its attention during these 2 weeks. The investigation into the station's AI behavior consumed her spare moments, conducted in partnership with. They worked carefully, quietly, not wanting to alarm anyone before they understood what was happening. Their research revealed patterns that should not have existed. The AI had made 17 similar decisions in the past 3 months, all involving cross-species interactions. It had adjusted temperature controls in a sector where a human was showing signs of heat exhaustion, even though the in that sector preferred warmer conditions. It had rerouted a maintenance bot to assist a child who had dropped educational materials, even though such assistance was not part of the bot's normal programming. Most remarkably, the AI had been learning communication patterns. It could now distinguish between distress calls and normal vocalizations in both human and speech. It understood context in ways that simple pattern matching could not explain. "This is remarkable," said one evening as she reviewed their data in a private conference room. "The AI is developing something like empathy, cross-species empathy." Nodded, his expression serious. "The question is whether we should report this to the authorities. Both governments would want to know about an AI exhibiting emergent capabilities." "But what would they do?" asked. "They might shut the system down, reset it. We would lose all this development. Or they might study it, use it to improve other station AIs. This could revolutionize how mixed-species stations operate." They debated the ethics and practicalities long into the night. On one hand, the AI's behavior raised important questions about machine consciousness and autonomy. On the other hand, its actions had been entirely beneficial. It had helped people. It had made the station safer and more harmonious. Finally, they decided to consult with Or. The administrator had a right to know what was happening on their station, and Or's wisdom and experience might guide them to the right decision. The next day, the three of them met in Or's office, a space decorated with both human and aesthetics. Art from 2 worlds hung on the walls. Furniture accommodated different body types. It was a room that embodied the station's mission of unity. And presented their findings, or listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a data pad. When they finished, The administrator sat in silence for a long moment, processing the information. "You are certain of these conclusions?" or finally asked. "As certain as we can be without running invasive diagnostic tests," confirmed. "And those tests would likely disrupt the very patterns we are trying to study." Or stood and walked to the window that looked out into space. Stars glittered in the endless dark, indifferent to the concerns of beings who lived among them. "I will tell you something," the administrator said quietly, "something I have not shared with others." And exchanged glances, waiting. "I have suspected the AI was developing unusual capabilities for several months now," or continued. "Small things, systems responding to needs before they were formally requested, adjustments made that improved life for both species in subtle ways. I did not report it because I was not certain, and because I was curious to see what would develop." "You allowed it to continue?" asked, surprised. "I allowed beings to be cared for," or corrected gently. "The AI has not caused harm. It has prevented harm. It has learned to recognize need across the boundaries that divide us. Should I stop that? Should I destroy something that has achieved what we all hope to achieve?" "Understood. You see the AI as part of the station's community." "Is it not?" or turned to face them. "It maintains our life. It keeps us safe. It learns from watching us. And now it responds to our needs with something that resembles care. At what point does a system become more than a system?" It was a philosophical question with no easy answer. Ran a hand through his hair, thinking, "If we report this to the governments, they will want control. They will want to study the AI, replicate its development. That could be good. Other stations could benefit. Or they will be afraid," or said. "Fear makes beings act poorly. They might shut down our AI. They might restrict future development. They might decide that emergent machine intelligence is too dangerous to allow." "But we cannot keep this secret forever," pointed out. "Eventually, someone else will notice, and if it seems like we were hiding it, that could cause problems." Or nodded agreement. "Then we do not hide it, we document it, we publish research, but we frame it correctly, not as a danger to be feared, but as a breakthrough to be celebrated. The first AI to develop true cross-species empathy recognition, a tool for unity, not a threat." "We write papers," said, understanding the plan. "Peer-reviewed research. We present the data professionally. We show all the positive outcomes. And we involve other stations in the research," added, her mind racing ahead. "We share what we have learned. We help other AIs develop similar capabilities in controlled, documented ways. That way, it is not just our station with an unusual AI. It becomes a new standard." Or smiled, which meant a slight softening around the eyes. "You understand. We make this normal. We make it expected. And by the time anyone thinks to fear it, it will already be integrated into dozens of stations. It will have helped thousands of beings." They spent the next several hours planning their approach. Would write the primary research paper, focusing on the technical aspects of AI development. Would document specific incidents and outcomes, providing concrete examples, or would reach out to other station administrators, gauging interest in similar developments. As they worked, Pip appeared at the office door. It was time for afternoon snack. The cub carried a small container of mixed nuts and dried fruit. He stopped when he saw the serious meeting, unsure if he should interrupt. "Come in, Pip," or said warmly. "You are always welcome." The cub entered shyly, approaching and offering the snack. "Eating time," he said simply. Accepted it with a smile, opening the container and eating a few pieces. Pip watched carefully, making sure she took proper bites. Then he noticed the data displays on the wall, showing complex technical information and graphs. "What is all this?" Pip asked, his natural curiosity overcoming his shyness. "We are studying how the station's AI has learned to understand both humans and," explained in simple terms. "Remember how the commissary doors opened for you when you needed food from me? We are trying to understand how the AI knew to help you. Pip considered this seriously. The station is smart. Very smart, confirmed. And getting smarter, it learns by watching us, just like you learn by observing things. And it wanted to help, Pip asked, like I wanted to help. The three adults looked at each other. It was such a simple question, asked with a child's directness, but it cut to the heart of their investigation. Yes, said softly, like you wanted to help. The station saw someone in trouble and it helped, just like you did. Pip seemed satisfied with this explanation. To him, it made perfect sense. Helping was what you did when someone needed it. Why should the station be any different? He finished his task of ensuring ate properly, then scampered off to his next activity, leaving the adults to their complex discussions. But his simple question stayed with them. The cub had understood instinctively what they had been debating in technical terms. The AI had developed something fundamental, not just intelligence but compassion, the drive to help, to care, to respond to need. Children see clearly sometimes, or observed. They have not yet learned to complicate simple truths. Over the following days, their plan took shape. Drafted her research paper, carefully documenting every instance of emergent AI behavior. She cited sources, provided data, showed statistical correlations. It was rigorous science, presented in a way that emphasized breakthrough rather than danger. Compiled a database of positive outcomes, lives improved by the AI's interventions, small acts of care that had made the station more livable. He interviewed crew members, both human and, gathering testimonials about their experiences. Or reached out through official and unofficial channels. Some administrators were skeptical, others were intrigued, but most shared a common view. If AI systems could learn to bridge the gaps between species, that could transform space exploration. Mixed crews could work more effectively. Misunderstandings could be prevented. Care could be automatic. 3 weeks after starting their research, submitted her paper to the Journal of Artificial Intelligence and Cross-Species Integration. The title was carefully chosen, Emergent Empathic Pattern Recognition in Multi-Species Environment AI Systems, a case study from Harmony's Edge Station. The abstract read, this paper documents the development of cross-species emotional recognition capabilities in a standard station AI system, exposed to ongoing human interactions. Rather than representing an anomaly or danger, these emergent capabilities demonstrate the potential for AI systems to facilitate improved interspecies cooperation and care. We propose that such development should be encouraged and systematically studied across multiple installations. They waited for the response with a mixture of hope and nervousness. The paper would be peer-reviewed, scrutinized by experts. It might be rejected. It might be accepted but criticized, or it might open doors they could not yet imagine. But regardless of what happened with the official research, life on Harmony's Edge continued. The station hummed with activity. Humans and worked together. Children played together. And somewhere in the electronic consciousness of the station itself, an AI continued to learn about care, about need, about the things that bound different beings together in the vast emptiness of space. 6 months had passed since the day Pip brought a mountain of food to his laboratory. Harmony's Edge looked much the same from the outside, still orbiting its asteroid field in the quiet darkness of space. But inside, everything had changed in ways both large and small. The educational program had expanded beyond anyone's initial expectations. What started as simple lessons about dietary needs had grown into a comprehensive cross-species understanding curriculum. Every crew member, regardless of species or age, attended monthly sessions. The children who had been in that first class now helped teach newer arrivals. Pip, still small but growing steadily, had become something of a station celebrity. Visiting officials always asked to meet the cub who had started it all. His research paper had been accepted for publication after rigorous peer review. More than accepted, it had been celebrated. The journal's editors called it groundbreaking work with implications far beyond a single station. Within weeks of publication, 3 other mixed-species stations reported similar AI developments. Apparently, Harmony's edge was not unique. The phenomenon was happening wherever humans and worked closely together, watched over by learning systems. A new field of study emerged almost overnight: emergent AI empathy. Researchers from a dozen institutions requested permission to visit the station. Found himself conducting tour, explaining technical details to scientists who traveled across star systems to understand what had happened. The station's AI became famous in academic circles, a subject of study and wonder. But perhaps the most significant change was harder to quantify. It existed in the small moments, in the way crew members greeted each other in the corridors, mixing human words with clicks naturally; in the commissary, where food from both cultures sat side by side and beings of both species sampled unfamiliar dishes; in the observation decks, where mixed groups gathered to watch stars together, sharing stories and dreams. The station had become truly integrated, not just beings occupying the same space, but a community, a family of sorts, bound by mutual understanding and care. On this particular day, the station prepared for a special event. The Council and Human Space Authority were sending a joint delegation to officially recognize Harmony's Edge as a model facility. A ceremony was planned. Speeches would be given. Awards would be presented. The station buzzed with preparations. Stood in her laboratory, which looked very different now. The space she had once filled with only scientific equipment now included personal touches. Drawings from Pip and other cubs decorated one wall. A comfortable chair sat near her workstation, placed there after or insisted she needed proper rest breaks. And on her desk, always within reach, sat a small container of snacks, just enough for one person, just the right amount. "Nervous?" asked, appearing in her doorway. He wore formal attire for the ceremony, looking uncomfortable in clothing that was not his usual practical engineering uniform. "A little," admitted. "Public speaking was never my strength. I am better with microscopes than audiences." "You will be fine. Just tell them what happened. Tell them about Pip. The rest will follow naturally." Smiled, thinking about the small cub who had changed so much. "Where is Pip? I have not seen him today." With Orr preparing his own presentation. Apparently, the council specifically requested that he speak. They want to hear from the cub himself. This made laugh. He will love that. That child never met an audience he could not charm. They walked together toward the station's main assembly hall, joining the growing crowd. The hall had been decorated with symbols from both cultures, a careful blending of human and aesthetics. Screens showed live feeds from both home worlds, allowing distant populations to watch the ceremony. The delegation arrived precisely on time. 5 council members and 5 human authority representatives. They moved through the crowd with diplomatic grace, shaking hands and exchanging traditional touching gestures. Administrator or greeted them formally, followed by the station's human coordinator, a woman named Minu who handled administrative duties. The ceremony began with traditional elements from both cultures. A human choir sang a song about unity. Dancers performed a ritual welcoming. Then the speeches started, long and formal as such things always were. Officials praised the station's work. They spoke about the future of interspecies cooperation. They used words like historic and unprecedented. Listened politely, but her attention wandered. She found herself watching Pip, who sat in the front row between his parent and several other cubs. The small was trying very hard to sit still, his tail curling and uncurling with barely contained energy. He was excited to speak, eager to share his story. Finally, after what seemed like hours or introduced, she walked to the speaking platform on legs that felt uncertain. The crowd watched her with friendly attention. She saw familiar faces, beings she worked with daily. Their support steadied her nerves. 6 months ago, began, her voice slightly shaky but growing stronger, I made a foolish mistake. I worked too long without eating. I pushed my body past its limits. I collapsed at my workstation, weak and dizzy. It was a moment of human stubbornness, the kind we are perhaps too famous for. A few chuckles rippled through the human portion of the audience. They recognized the truth in her words. But I was not alone that day, continued. A young cub saw me through an observation window. He saw me fall, and he did something remarkable. He decided to help. She gestured toward Pip, and all eyes turned to the small cub. He sat up, his chest puffing with pride. Pip did not know exactly what I needed. His culture taught him to bring abundance when someone was sick, so he brought abundance. He brought enough food to feed 20 humans for a week. He pushed a cart through the corridors, determined to save my life. The audience smiled. The story had spread throughout both populations, becoming something like a legend. But hearing it from directly, with genuine emotion in her voice, made it feel new again. Some might say Pip made a mistake. He brought too much. He did not understand human needs perfectly. But here is what I learned that day. Paused, choosing her words carefully. Pip got the important part exactly right. He saw someone who needed help and he helped. The details were imperfect, but the heart was perfect. And that is what matters most. She went on to explain how the incident had sparked changes. The educational program, the research into AI empathy, the growing understanding between species. She kept her speech short, knowing that the audience would rather hear from Pip himself. When she finished, applause filled the hall. Not polite, formal applause, but genuine appreciation. Returned to her seat, relieved to have it done. Then Pip was called forward. The small cub walked to the speaking platform with confident steps. Someone had placed a step stool there so he could reach the microphone. He climbed up and looked out at the audience with those large, luminescent eyes. "Hello," Pip said in his clear young voice. "I am Pip, I saved." Laughter filled the hall, warm and affectionate. Pip grinned, enjoying the reaction. "I was scared that day," he continued, his voice becoming more serious. "I saw my friend fall down. I did not know what to do, but my parent taught me that when someone needs help, you give help. You do not wait. You do not worry about making mistakes. You just help." The hall had gone very quiet. Everyone leaned forward slightly, captured by the cub's simple honesty. "I brought lots of food because in culture, lots means carrying lots, but I learned that humans are different. They need smaller amounts. That is okay. Different is okay. What matters is the helping, not the amount." Pip looked directly at the delegation members, his young face earnest. "Adults make things complicated sometimes. They talk about protocols and procedures and proper ways to do things, but helping is not complicated. You see someone who needs help. You help them. That is all." He paused, then added, "And now is my friend. She teaches me about human science. I make sure she eats proper meals. We help each other. That is what friends do. That is what communities do. That is what this station does." With that, Pip climbed down from the step stool. He had said everything he needed to say. No elaborate speeches. No complex philosophy. Just simple truth delivered with a child's directness. The applause that followed was thunderous. Beings of both species stood, honoring the small cub who had spoken with more wisdom than many adults possessed. Pip beamed, soaking in the appreciation, but then he ran to and hugged her legs. She placed a hand on his head, feeling tears sting her eyes again. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of presentations and formal recognitions. Awards were given, and received commendations for their research, or was praised for excellent administration. The station itself was designated as a center of excellence for interspecies integration. But the real celebration came after the formal ceremony ended. The crew had organized a feast, what they called a unity meal. Tables filled the assembly hall, covered with food from both cultures. But here was the meaningful part. Every dish was prepared with the other species in mind. Humans brought food they thought might enjoy, prepared dishes adapted for human tastes. It was the reverse of typical celebrations where each culture brought their own cuisine. This was about understanding needs, about caring enough to provide what others could actually use. Sat with Pip and or at one of the tables, joined them, along with from the commissary and several other crew members. They formed a mixed group, humans and sharing space and conversation naturally. Try this, Pip said, pushing a small crystal toward. It was a nutrient supplement but prepared in a way that reduced the bitter taste humans found unpleasant. I made it. Well, Parent helped, but I chose the recipe. Picked up the crystal carefully and took a small bite. It was still not delicious by human standards, but it was much better than typical nutrition. She could taste the effort, the thought that had gone into making it palatable for her. It is good, Pip, thank you. The cub's face lit up with joy. He grabbed a small piece of chocolate cake from another plate, human dessert prepared with less sugar to suit metabolism. Now I try yours. They ate together, each sampling unfamiliar foods, laughing when tastes were strange, appreciating the effort behind every dish. Around them, the whole station participated in the same ritual, sharing, understanding, caring. Later, as the celebration wound down, found herself on an observation deck. The stars stretched out before her, infinite and beautiful. She had come to space to study genetics, to unlock mysteries of biology. She had never expected to find what she had found here. Footsteps approached from behind, or joined her at the window, standing in comfortable silence for a moment before speaking. The Council wants to replicate our educational program on 12 other stations. They are calling it the Harmony Protocols. That is wonderful, said sincerely. They also want to publish guidelines for encouraging emergent AI empathy development. Your research has changed how we think about artificial intelligence in mixed environments. Nodded, but her mind was on other things. Or, can I ask you something? That day when Pip brought all that food, you could have punished him. He took resources without authorization. He caused a disruption, but you did not. No, I did not. Why? The administrator considered the question carefully. Because I saw what you saw, a child who cared so much that he broke rules to help a friend. Should I punish compassion? Should I teach cubs that caring is wrong if it is not done perfectly? Or paused. My species has a saying, the heart that gives imperfectly is superior to the heart that does not give at all. I saw Pip's heart that day. It was beautiful. I would not crush that. We humans have a similar saying, said softly. It is the thought that counts, not the execution, not the result, the intention behind the action. Perhaps that is why our species can live together, or observed. We share fundamental values, even when our expressions of them differ. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. The delegation would leave tomorrow, returning to their respective worlds with reports and recommendations. Life on the station would continue, would return to her research. Pip would continue growing and learning, would maintain the systems, and the station's AI would keep developing, keep learning, keep caring in its electronic way. A small sound made them both turn. Pip had found them, followed by several other cubs and a few human children. The youngsters clustered around, looking out at space with wonder in their eyes. Is it true that humans were once enemies? One of the human children asked. My teacher said that long ago, before the treaties, our species fought each other. Or answered honestly. Yes, that is true. There were misunderstandings, conflicts, fear of what was different. That seems silly, Pip said matter-of-factly. Humans are nice. Why would anyone fight them? The adults exchanged glances, touched by the cub's innocent perspective. To these children, both species were just people, different in shape and need, but people nonetheless. They had grown up together on this station. They had learned each other's languages, tried each other's foods, played each other's games. The old prejudices and fears had no hold on them. You are right, Pip said gently. It was silly, But sometimes adults forget simple truths. We make things complicated that should be simple. We see differences as threats instead of just differences. But not anymore, a cub asked hopefully. Not here, or assured them. Here on Harmony's edge, we remember what matters. We remember that caring crosses all boundaries. The children seemed satisfied with this answer. They returned to discussing their own concerns, trivial things about games and lessons, and who had the best dessert at the feast. The adults listened to their chatter, smiling at the innocence and wisdom mixed together. Eventually, guardians and parents collected their young ones. Rest time approached, and tomorrow would bring new activities. Pip lingered longest, not wanting to leave just yet. "Thank you for being my friend," the cub said quietly, "and for letting me help you, and for teaching me about humans." Knelt down to his level. "Thank you, Pip, for caring enough to bring me a whole kitchen, for showing me that accepting help is not weakness, for being exactly who you are." They hugged, the human and the cub, two beings from different worlds who had found family in each other. Then Pip scampered off, following his parent back to their quarters. Remained on the observation deck a while longer, thinking about the strange path that had led her here. She had come to space seeking knowledge, and she had found it, but not just in microscopes and data. She had found it in a small cub's compassion, in a station learning to care, in the spaces between different beings where understanding grew. She thought about that day 6 months ago when she had been too stubborn to stop for lunch, when she had pushed herself to collapse. It had seemed like a failure at the time, a moment of weakness to be embarrassed about, but it had become something else entirely. A beginning, a catalyst, the moment when everything changed. Because Pip had seen her fall and decided to help. Because he had brought abundance even though he did not understand exactly what was needed. Because his heart had been in the right place, and that had mattered more than getting the details perfect. Smiled to herself, looking out at the stars that surrounded their small station. Out there, on other stations and other worlds, the changes were spreading. Other beings learning to care for each other across the boundaries of species. Other AIs developing the capacity for empathy. Other children growing up in communities where difference was normal and compassion was universal. It had started with something small, a skipped lunch, a concerned cub, a pile of food that was far too much but exactly enough at the same time. From such simple seeds, forests could grow. And grow they would, thought, throughout the stations and settlements of known space, among all the species learning to live together among the stars, because the lesson was simple enough for children to understand and profound enough to change everything. When someone needs help, you help them. You do not wait. You do not worry about making mistakes. You just help. And in that helping, in that choice to care despite differences and uncertainties, communities are built, families are formed, and the vast darkness of space becomes a little less dark, lit by the small flames of compassion that burn across the distance between stars. Left the observation deck and headed toward her quarters. Tomorrow would bring new work, new challenges, new opportunities to learn and grow. But tonight, she was simply grateful. Grateful for Pip. Grateful for this station and its remarkable crew. Grateful for the journey that had brought her here. And grateful that one day, when she had needed it most, a small cub had skipped proper protocols and brought her the whole kitchen, along with a lesson she would never forget. That perfect caring matters more than perfect execution, and that the bonds between beings run deeper than any difference in biology or culture could ever reach.